The Battle of Bosworth Field, 1485, the end of the Wars of the Roses and the birth of the Tudor dynasty. On 22 August 1485, a battle that would determine the future of England was fought in a field near the village of Market Bosworth, Leicestershire. This battle is known as the Battle of Bosworth Field. It was not just an ordinary military confrontation, but a turning point in English history that closed the long chapter of the Wars of the Roses and opened a new era under the rule of the Tudor dynasty. Let us explore the background of the conflict, the course of the battle, the figures involved, and the long-term consequences of Henry Tudor's victory over King Richard III. Background: the Wars of the Roses. Before discussing the Battle of Bosworth Field, we must understand the larger context, the Wars of the Roses. This was a prolonged civil war between two branches of the royal Plantagenet family: House of Lancaster, represented by the Red Rose; House of York, represented by the White Rose. The war began in 1455 and lasted for 3 decades, filled with betrayal, political intrigue, and bloody struggles for power. At its core, the conflict was sparked by a dynastic dispute over the English throne stemming from the descendants of Edward III. The Lancastrians believed they had the legitimate claim, while the Yorkists challenged it. In the latter half of the 15th century, King Edward IV of York managed to secure the throne, but after his death in 1483, turmoil returned. Edward IV left a young heir, Edward V, who was imprisoned with his younger brother in the Tower of London by his uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Soon after, Richard seized the crown and became King Richard III. Many nobles were displeased with Richard's usurpation, especially after rumors spread that the 2 young princes, later known as the Princes in the Tower, had been murdered. Richard's reputation deteriorated, creating an opportunity for his Lancastrian rival, Henry Tudor. The rise of Henry Tudor. Henry Tudor was not the strongest candidate for the throne, but in a time of chaos, he became the symbol of hope for the Lancastrians. He was descended from the House of Lancaster through his mother, Lady Margaret Beaufort. He had spent much of his life in exile in France and Brittany, avoiding the turbulence of the Wars of the Roses in England. With support from his mother, Lancastrian loyalists, and aid from France, Henry resolved to reclaim the throne he believed belonged to his family. In the summer of 1485, Henry landed in Wales with a modest force of about 5,000 to 6,000 men, mostly French mercenaries and Welsh supporters. He then marched east, seeking to strengthen his ranks and win over discontented English nobles. The armies. Yorkist Army, King Richard III. Strength: around 10,000 to 12,000 men. Composition: royal forces, loyal Yorkist nobles, and large contingents from the Duke of Norfolk and Earl of Northumberland. Advantages: greater numbers, a strong defensive position, and the legitimacy of being the reigning king. Lancastrian Army, Henry Tudor. Strength: around 5,000 to 6,000 men. Composition: French mercenaries, Welsh troops, and a few English nobles who had joined along the way. Weaknesses: smaller numbers, some troops inexperienced, heavily reliant on the uncertain loyalty of allies. A crucial factor was the stance of Lord Thomas Stanley and Sir William Stanley, 2 powerful nobles commanding about 6,000 men. Officially aligned with Richard, their loyalty was questionable due to family ties with Henry. His mother had married Thomas Stanley. Their indecision or betrayal would prove decisive. The battle. On the morning of 22 August 1485, the 2 armies clashed near Market Bosworth. Initial positions. Richard positioned his troops on a hill, giving him a strong defensive advantage. Henry advanced with his smaller force, hoping for the Stanley brothers' support, who remained on the sidelines observing. The fighting begins. Richard's forces struck first, led by John Howard, Duke of Norfolk, commanding the Yorkist vanguard. Fierce fighting followed, but Henry's disciplined French troops and motivated Welsh supporters held firm against the larger army. The role of the Stanleys. The Stanley brothers initially stood idle, watching the course of battle unfold. Richard expected their aid, while Henry anxiously awaited a signal of support. Their indecision frustrated Richard. Richard III's bold charge. Spotting an opportunity, Richard made a daring move. He personally led a cavalry charge directly at Henry Tudor, aiming to kill him and end the battle at once. Richard displayed remarkable courage, breaking through enemy lines and nearly reaching Henry himself. Stanley's intervention. At this critical moment, Sir William Stanley's forces intervened to protect Henry. They struck Richard's cavalry from the flank, overwhelming the king's men. Richard was surrounded, unhorsed, and killed on the battlefield.
The death of Richard III. Richard III became the last English king to die in battle. He fought valiantly to the end, refusing to retreat despite being hopelessly outnumbered. Chroniclers note that he fought with great bravery but was ultimately cut down by superior forces. His corpse was found battered on the battlefield. Legend has it his helmet was removed, his body mocked, and then brought to Leicester to be displayed before being given a modest burial. Henry Tudor's victory and the birth of the Tudor dynasty. With Richard dead, the battle was over. Henry Tudor was proclaimed king and crowned as Henry VII. He later married Elizabeth of York, daughter of Edward IV, uniting the rival houses of Lancaster and York. Their union produced a new symbol, the Tudor rose, combining the red rose of Lancaster and the white rose of York. This marriage marked the official end of the Wars of the Roses. Although some minor uprisings followed, Henry's triumph at Bosworth ushered in a new era, the Tudor dynasty, which ruled for over a century and produced monarchs such as Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. Historical significance. The end of the Wars of the Roses. Bosworth was the climax of the dynastic struggle, effectively ending the conflict. The beginning of the Tudor dynasty. Henry Tudor established a new royal line that brought political stability after decades of civil war. Political change. The victory shifted power from feudal nobility to a more centralized monarchy, strengthening the crown. Cultural legacy. The story of Bosworth and Richard's downfall inspired many works, most famously Shakespeare's Richard III, portraying him as an ambitious and ruthless figure. Modern discovery: the grave of Richard III. In 2012, archaeologists uncovered skeletal remains believed to be Richard III beneath a parking lot in Leicester at the site of the former Greyfriars Friary. DNA testing confirmed his identity, providing evidence of the fatal battle wounds. In 2015, his remains were reburied with honor at Leicester Cathedral. This remarkable discovery reignited public interest in Richard III and the Battle of Bosworth, showing how history can still reveal surprises centuries later. Conclusion. The Battle of Bosworth Field, 1485, was one of the most pivotal events in English history. It ended the Wars of the Roses, closed the chapter of the Plantagenets, and opened the path for the Tudor dynasty, which would guide England toward its early modern transformation. Henry Tudor's victory was not only military but also political and symbolic. By marrying Elizabeth of York, he united the warring roses and created a lasting emblem of English unity. From the fields of Bosworth emerged a dynasty that would reshape England forever.